Hey, well, what's up, guys? Welcome back to The Collision. Daniel here, and everyone's favorite fedora-wearing, whip-swinging archaeologist may have gone on a last crusade decades ago, but he's still around. He's still kicking, looking for some more adventures. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny just hit theaters. I've seen it, so let's talk about it. So I should say just right up top that I am a big Indiana Jones fan. I grew up with those original movies, some of the first sort of live action movies that I ever watched, which, hey, maybe makes my dad a bad father because there's some pretty heavy stuff in those movies. But like a lot of people, just the fun kind of swashbuckling adventure just drew me in as a kid. And it was when I was a kid. Those movies were a long time ago. There was a sequel, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which is pretty much universally hated. Not a lot of people were happy with that movie. Kind of sad that was the send-off of this iconic character. So in many ways, Dial of Destiny is an attempt to kind of right the wrongs of that failed sequel and to kind of give Indiana Jones the proper send-off that we all feel like he deserves. And unfortunately, too often in this film, it sort of boldly steps forward right onto the same booby traps that kind of derailed that sequel. It's sort of a bizarre, sure to be controversial ending, and just some of the stuff that just doesn't feel like classic Indiana Jones. There are flashes of sort of what made people fall in love with this character in the first place. Hey, his style has not changed, even if his physical body has aged. So there is some fun and some charm. And Harrison Ford is Harrison Ford, so he's always good. But unfortunately, this film just never manages to capture the fun, kind of that wonder, the fun sense of adventure that those original films did, and kind of, as we'll get into, you almost leave the theater feeling sad for the character of Indiana Jones rather than like rushing off to the nearest costume store to want to be him. So let's get into this. So this film starts off with a pretty extended, probably a 20-minute scene, which is set in the past, featuring a very convincing job of de-aging Harrison Ford to look like he did back when those original movies came out. And again, the de-aging is not entirely lifelike. You know that it's not really in Harrison Ford, from time traveling from the past. Although it is so. It does look so believable that you do sort of forget almost, and it is this sort of almost surreal feeling that you're sort of watching the sequel that they would have made after Last Crusade decades ago if they had decided to continue making those movies. And I think, at least for me personally, and maybe it's just the nostalgia kicking in, but that opening sequence is by far the best part of this movie. Because even beyond just sort of capturing like the look, like the young Indiana Jones you remember, even beyond that, it, more than any other part in this film, it feels like you're watching an Indiana Jones movie. Harrison Ford feels like Harrison Ford. The character is sort of, he has that charm, and just sort of some of the set pieces and the action feels just like it was ripped out of an earlier era. So that is definitely fun and almost worth the price of the movie, just to sort of get to relive a little bit of that film. But sadly, kind of from there, nothing else for the rest of the film ever kind of reaches that same height. Sort of the film transitions from that scene to the newer, or rather the older Indiana Jones, as he's a cranky old man reclining in his chair, just mad at his neighbors for playing loud music. And very much, and the film doesn't try and conceal or pretend that Harrison Ford's not 80 years old now. This is very much an older Indiana Jones, and the film embraces that, which I think is good. But it does lead to a very different type of film that I don't think works as well as sort of those earlier scenes. And there are some good elements. John Williams' score does some serious heavy lifting in this film. It's great, as you expect it to. And there's this thing about hearing that like iconic theme song that even like the most cynical person can't help but like smiling and like feeling some of that adventure. Although sort of the music and even starting with that great opening sequence kind of serves as a reminder of just like how fun those original films were and like the feelings you had at the time. and sort of shines a light in contrast of like how much less fun an old cranky Indiana Jones is compared to some of those earlier films. And the story itself too, all the Indiana Jones stories, kind of by nature, by design, are somewhat convoluted. There's a MacGuffin, they got to go here, and there's a clue, and that's some of the appeal, and they're traveling around the world and stuff. But this film in particular feels even more so convoluted. There's so much going on. There's so many, they got to get this piece, but that's a fake, and then there's this piece, but to read this piece, they got to get this piece, but only this person knows how to translate this piece, and then they got to bring it to this place, and there's so much sort of plot, this contrived plot stuff, and even characters, different factions, and there's the bad guys, but they're working with the CIA, and then there's they go to some new location, and now there's the mafia involved, and there's so much that seems stuffed into this movie, which is like 2 hours and 45 minutes, that it very much does feel bloated and kind of weighed down by just how much is going on, that sort of suffocates some of just sort of that easygoing, simplistic fun of sort of the classic adventure. And the new characters in this film are somewhat hit or miss. Mads Mikkelsen is sort of the villain in this, and I think he's great. He's sort of this like mad scientist, but he's not over the top or cheesy in any way. He is sort of menacing and does sort of have a presence throughout this film. Kind of the other side of that is Phoebe Waller-Bridge is introduced as Indiana Jones' goddaughter. And I know a lot of like the pre-screening stuff, she's already kind of proven to be somewhat of people have mixed opinions on it. I didn't feel as strong as some people did. She is sort of presented as a very like spunky, kind of wise-cracking foil to Indiana Jones. And I don't think she's a terrible character like some people have, other like reviewers have felt about her. Although I do think more often than not, rather than coming across as like endearing, she more just kind of comes across as obnoxious. And I think some of the reason why I didn't get as like invested in her character is just that she sort of takes front and center too often in this movie, especially like in the middle of this film. It almost feels like it's her film, and like Indiana Jones, Harrison Ford's like the Sean Connery, like he's like the side character that she's playing off of, rather than the other way around. And some of that's just because, hey, Harrison Ford's 80, he can't do as many of the action-y things as he used to, so some of those moments are given to Bridges' character rather than Harrison Ford. But she does, and again, by the end of the film, I liked her enough, she was fine, but it does kind of almost tragically and shockingly feel like Harrison Ford is sort of sidelined in an Indiana Jones movie, which is not what I think what anyone wants from sort of his final film. As far as kind of content to consider, things going on the surface, really not a whole lot in this film. Language, there's a kind of a handful of maybe more minor profanities, and then God and Jesus, like their names get used multiple times, kind of wrongly used. But other than that, there's no real language in this. Sexuality, there's no sexuality other than Bridges' character, sort of, she's constantly eyeing up men that she thinks is attractive, but nothing happens from that. And violence, kind of one of the things that doesn't get carried over from the originals is this completely gratuitous, shockingly violent scene like many of the other movies have had. Lots of characters die and get shot, and there's blood. Kind of a pretty high body count, but there's no like equivalent to like the face melting scene or the heart ripped out. Nothing like shockingly over the top violent. Maybe the most that there is a character gets killed in like a car or a plane crash, and then you see his body later, and his skin's very much like burnt and like boiled, and it is gross, and the camera doesn't linger on it. But it's compared to some of the earlier stuff, this is a more tame Indiana Jones film. As far as things kind of going on beneath the surface, some like themes, and there is some interesting stuff that's going on in this movie. And one of the most interesting, at least as a Christian, is sort of this sort of balance between like faith and belief and then like science. Because Indiana Jones is very much, he's an archaeologist, he's like a man of science, and sort of in a flashback scene in this film, he's sort of reprimanding his partner who's sort of expressing his belief in these supernatural or natural powers, and he says, but you can't, Indiana Jones says, but you can't prove it. Proving it is what makes it science, which is kind of, that said in the past. The current Indiana Jones, hey, he's seen some stuff. He's seen some aliens. He's seen some angels of death come from the Ark. He's definitely experienced stuff. And kind of throughout the film, he reminisces on the fact that he's seen things that he can't prove, that he can't explain, although he can't deny that he saw. And there's a quote that has been featured like in the trailers where he muses. It's not that he's learned. It's not so much what you believe. It's about how hard you believe it. Which is very much sort of a relativistic view of sort of truth. But it does kind of capture the growth of his character from more of like a naturalist. It's all about science and proving it, to very much more like an agnostic that, hey, there is some stuff out there that I can't explain, but I do believe in it. And kind of adding to that conversation, I get another angle as Mad Mikkelsen's character, the villain in this, sort of kind of represents like the other approach to that he sees in some stuff. He believes in like the power of these devices, but he kind of constantly expresses that it's all math, it's all just science, and even the things that seem miraculous, he can explain it through kind of just through math and through data. And in a way, that's kind of the approach that the film takes, that there isn't necessarily a whole lot of like supernatural stuff going on. It is seem more kind of mathematical, but hey, it is an interesting sort of theme to explore through Indiana Jones's character. Sort of, what is true? What can you believe? Is there more than we can kind of touch and quantify? Maybe the other thing that's sort of constantly throughout this is just the idea of like history and time. We do get a couple classic, that belongs in a museum from Indiana Jones to kind of showcase his sort of reverence for the past and protecting and preserving history. But even as time itself, the fact Indiana Jones is older, he kind of reminisces on his past, that he can't do things like he once did. So there sort of is this, how do you deal with sort of aging and mortality? And he reflects a lot on like memories, and mostly painful memories of his life, and sort of how do you go beyond that? Can you kind of turn back time and fix things, or do you just sort of embrace the time that you're in? And even on a kind of a weird meta level, just the fact that this film sort of starts with like technology using their own like dial of destiny to turn back the clock and kind of show Indiana Jones like as a younger form, just becomes a weird sort of exploration of like, hey, should we let Indiana Jones just stay in his chair, grow old, or do we sort of need to keep kind of trying to relive the past? So there is some interesting kind of themes and stuff, both like in the film itself and more on like a meta level that I think Christians can kind of engage with. So in the end, although I'm a huge Indiana Jones fan, just some of the trailers and like the early negative buzz towards this film did lower my expectations going into it. And I think they kind of landed right where those lower expectations were. There is some fun to be had. There is some kind of entertaining action set pieces, and Harrison Ford does sort of kind of re-embody his classic character, and there's some fun in that, and like the John Williams score. But I think too often this one just doesn't feel like an Indiana Jones movie. The nostalgia doesn't hit as hard as I think it should hit, or that the filmmakers want it to hit. And in some ways, this feels more like a film that's inspired by like the National Treasure movies rather than the film that inspired the National Treasure movies. It feels more like a modern attempt to tell a classic story rather than like a organic continuation of those stories. And even the ending, again, no spoilers, but they go bold. They take a big chance at the ending, which personally, I don't think it works. I found it anticlimactic. I found it just not a good ending. And even like the very end of this film, sort of the way to finally kind of send off this, kind of put an end to the franchise, almost feels less satisfying than even the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull ending, which itself felt less satisfying than The Last Crusade. So it definitely does feel like it is time just to let Indy go sit in his rocking chair, grow old. No more adventures for you. I think as a culture, we've sort of gone beyond the Indiana Jones movies. But hey, let me know what you think. If you were excited for this movie, if you were hesitant due to some of the more negative buzz, or hey, whether you saw this and you enjoyed it, you love sort of reliving this character, reliving that world, and some of the nostalgia. We'd love to have a conversation with you about that. So jump in the comment section. And hey, if you haven't done so, I encourage you guys, subscribe to our channel, become a Collider. Got a lot of other movie reviews and live streams and fun stuff. Would love to have you be a part of that. But most of all, guys, thanks for watching. Stay safe and continue to collide with your world for Christ.